All right, everybody. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today and attending today's ePractice Manager Presents webinar on HHS spending. Today, we will be joined by Elliott Tracy, partner and CPA at Jones Roth. Elliott specializes in practice benchmarking, cash flow planning, and tax planning for dental practice owners. Elliott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. It's great to be joining you guys again for one of these webinars. And about, I want to say it was probably 4.5 months ago now, I did another one on Paycheck Protection Program, which was a really exciting time and topic. And we had a lot of things happening. And again, we've got a lot of really exciting things happening in dental and so going to be another really interesting rest of this year. So for today, like Sarah had mentioned, we're going to talk about the HHS provider relief funds and what that spending looks like and some of the uses and things that you can and can't use it for. That's the big topic. That's our objective. So when we're done with this, my hope is that you understand what those issues are and what the uses can be. So. Roadmap, we'll start off with a little overview of the HHS provider relief funds. Not too long ago, we thought we were going to be done with this topic, but it has spurred up again with the continued extension of the program. We'll talk about a few of the things that have a lot of people concerned, and that's the balance billing and reporting. The balance billing and reporting is something that, there's been some miscommunication. I think hopefully we can clarify that today. We'll talk about terms and conditions, so that's some of the uses of these funds. That'll get mixed in a little bit, but more than anything there, I'm going to point you in the direction of where this information is. And then I have a few final thoughts on a couple of things, not only in regard to this, but just some other stuff in general for the rest of this year that I thought I'd share with you. So let's start off with the overview of HHS. So this was first available on July 10th, 2020 to dentists. And at that time, was really a lot of confusion surrounding this program, and what does it mean? Who could use it, and who couldn't? Who couldn't get it? What was the dollar amount, and all those things. So July 10th is that magical day. Before I get too far into this, I meant to mention this right when we started, so I'll go ahead and mention it now. But in the chat, if you have questions you want to answer, or you have questions as we go and you need an answer, go ahead and put those in the Q&A chat on the top, so the top bubble, and then I can answer those either as we go. Hopefully some of those questions are things that I will cover. If not, we'll cover all of those at the end. So go ahead and use the Q&A for that. So I'm sorry, I meant to mention that earlier, but now we've got that there. I see that we already have one question come in. So as I mentioned a little while ago, this was extended to August 28th. Initially, the end of that application period had started on August 3rd. So they gave July 10th to August 3rd. That wasn't nearly enough time, but really to provide guidance and get all the things out. And so when I say, not nearly enough time, when this was available, the American Dental Association had a lot of questions that still needed to be answered, and there was a lot of concern. And I'll mention what a few of those things are. And, one of those is that fourth bullet point right there. And, a lot of people right in the beginning, because it was very similar to how medical was done, they thought you were required to have either CHIP or Medicare or Medicaid, some type of government program that you were seeing patients. That wasn't the case for dental, and it wasn't really made aware on the front end that was the case. So a lot of folks missed out in the beginning, not realizing that you didn't have to have those things, which is one of the reasons why this program has continued to be extended. Jumping back to that third bullet point, so generally it's going to be about 2% of your collections. So that's usually what these program reimbursements have been. So you look at your collections, either 2018 or 2019, but it's going to be, you pick the year that has the highest collection, that's going to result in the highest amount of funding that you'll receive. Next, and then who applies for this? So anybody that has a tax identification number. So individuals can apply for this, but the key is if that's the case, the individual needs to apply, and on your individual tax return, you need to be reporting dental income on either a schedule, generally a Schedule C is where you're going to see that. So if there is income being reported in that spot, then the individual can apply. Otherwise, I think most dental practices, which are some type of corporation or partnership or something, are the ones who will be applying. So a couple of other things in regard to it. So those that have completed the application, this is going to look very familiar. You're going to have seen these questions. For those that have not done the application yet, it's going to ask some questions about healthcare related expenses due to the coronavirus or due to COVID-19. What it's referring to is what things did you have to purchase in either to keep the office safe or to bring the office up to a level that it is possible for you to meet the requirements of health agencies and OSHA and all those different areas. So supplies and equipment are one of those things. So I know some dental offices has purchased air purifiers, some of these aerosol reducers, some of the equipment related to that. Those items are all going to qualify. Other things that qualify, so training and emergency protocols in regard to COVID. So, obviously if you have the identification of somebody who has COVID, as a training or emergency protocols if somebody is exposed to COVID or what happens, following when somebody is exposed to COVID. And then also the acquiring additional resources. So it refers to here as, acquiring new staff, facilities, technology, etc. And it does reiterate supplies and equipment in that as well. But those are all healthcare related expenses that you would include on your application as an expenses related to COVID. Lost revenues was a little more confusing. A lot of folks didn't really quite realize what was being referred to here, but mainly this is obviously lost revenue from you not working, but other things that included was the employee contract payroll and health insurance, rent, mortgage payments, equipment leases, and EHR licensing and fees. So when you looked at a lot of these things, the lost revenues, I know most offices lost anywhere between 100 to 200 or more, 200,000 or more in the 6 weeks that they were out. And again, that does depend, state by state locations. Other states obviously had more stringent shutdown than some, and so in those states, I think we saw a much bigger drop. Where I reside here in Oregon, that was a good example. There were 6 full weeks where a dental office was not working unless it was to see emergency patients. And so if it was a general office that maybe didn't see a lot of that, their revenue was pretty minimal. But some of the more specialty offices, oral surgery offices or maybe a periodontist, where there are more things that come up and more emergencies that potentially come up, they were working a little bit more, but very, very, very limited because of just the requirements of it having to be an emergency. Got a couple more things in regard to your overview. So big overview and a big question that's come up a lot is, can you receive these HHS provider relief funds and receive some of the SBA funding? And that's specifically the Paycheck Protection Loan or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, so PPP, and the EIDL. I assume a lot of folks here have done that. So yes, the answer is yes, you can do that, and there's no problem with that. Here's some really helpful information that's also included. So if you go out to the American Dental Association's website, they have some provider relief FAQs. That's where a lot of this information that I've kept up on and others have kept up on. There's some really great Q&A in there of this or that and how it applies to a dental office. It's about 3 pages long. It's not too difficult. There's some good information in there. And then like everybody else, we have some publications out. So this was one of the first that we posted right around early July when this became available. If anybody wants to go out and read, there's some real general basic information in there. HHS also has their CARES Act Provider Relief Fund. This is the location of their FAQs, or I'm sorry, this is the location of their FAQs. And then the number 3 here, that's their general page where you can navigate to see any of the application process. So this is really helpful information when you're kind of talking about the overview and what it is. I'm going to go ahead and answer one of the questions because I think it just kind of came up a moment ago, and just to reiterate it. So if you do not see any medical or Medicare patients, will you still qualify for this? Yes, absolutely. That was one of the things with dentists that you were not necessarily required to see any of those. And I want to reiterate too, by doing this, it does not mean that you are now required to see them or enroll for any additional insurance or Medicaid or Medicare program. So that was not the requirement there. This was just an additional, I believe it was about $5 to $10 billion available. Okay. Next, so one of the, what you might even call it, one of the horror stories that kind of came out of this to begin with was you had a lot of dentists who rushed to go apply. And once they applied for it, there was a big concern is, now do I have to do balance billing? And most dental offices don't even really know what balance billing is because it doesn't come up. It comes up in medical more often, and as a result of that, a lot were really afraid of, what did I just sign up for? Well, the real key here, and the ADA heard a lot of the issues that dentists were bringing up, and then some of the legal counsel they were receiving and advisors who are telling them to go do it or don't do it for different reasons. The ADA did come out and say, you know what, this balance or what they call surprise billing, this is only going to come up if you are actually treating a patient that has COVID or has a presumptive case of COVID. So that's highly unlikely to be happening, because if you know somebody who has that, you're generally not going to see them. And that patient is, if they come into your office and you ask them all the general questions and, do you have any signs? Have you been around anybody? Blah, yada, yada. Once you find out that that's the case, you're generally not going to see that person. So it's only something that you'll have to do when you're actually treating a patient that has COVID or a presumptive case of COVID. So like I said, very highly unlikely. Now, if this does apply, if it does happen, if there is an emergency, somebody has COVID, there's nothing you can do to avoid, then I would really go review the HHS FAQs. This is a little bit outside of my realm. More than anything, I want you to be aware of that it is there, and it is something that you need to be aware of. But if you have questions there, I would definitely go look at the HHS FAQs. That's a big piece of this. Little more on balance billing. Now we're going to move into kind of some of the reporting functions. So for a dental office, if you're receiving these funds, there is a public list that is posted on the CDC's website. No matter how small the amount, the name and the amount will be posted on that website. So you can see it on the CDC's website. CDC Provider Relief Funds list, I guess, is, public list is really what it's referred to. So I know that has deterred a few folks from wanting to go out and get these funds. The same thing, was available when, we all received Paycheck Protection Program. A list of that was also published. Now, the smaller the loan, the names weren't really released at that point, but some of the bigger loans, I think we all saw the program or some of the companies that received that. So very similar. There is some public, and more than the way the CDC describes it, and HHS, that they wanted there to be some transparency of who were receiving these provider relief funds. Also in the reporting part, so if you are receiving a payment of $10,000 or more in the aggregate, so there was one set of funding that could be received much earlier on for folks who actually did see Medicare and Medicaid, and then the second round came, which basically opened it up for everyone. If at that point between those two things you're receiving $10,000 or more in aggregate, you do have a reporting requirement. That reporting will be within 45 days of the end of the calendar year 2020. So by February 15th of 2021, you will be required to report this information to HHS. I put the link down here that has the actual notice that went out. It's about 2 pages long and it explains everything that needs to happen. So I'm sure there are some concerns about, what kind of things can you use it for? What kind of things can you not use it for? Really, if you are to use these funds for the day-to-day operations of the practice. And if you're using it for anything other than that, that's when you're going to get yourself in trouble. So the terms and conditions, what they describe are mostly what you can't use it for. And I don't, it's actually somewhat funny if you spend time actually looking through it. You know, a lot of the things within that list are things that you would never even have considered using it for, because you receive these funds to help keep your dental practice afloat, and using it to, you know, cover some of the differences that you haven't been, or, you know, differences in terms of your office wasn't as busy. You were closed for 6 weeks. So I'll give you, I'm not going to pull up the terms and conditions. It's a fairly long document. It goes through a lot of different things, but I'll tell you a couple of the more interesting things that they wanted to make sure were included in there of what you could not use these funds for. So you cannot use these funds for lobbying, for any kind of political, you know, whatever it was politically that you know, an initiative that you have, you cannot use it for any lobbying. You can't use it to promote any type of specific propaganda. The propaganda, whatever sorts, again, very political in nature. You can't use it to support any kind of prohibition of gun right laws or restrictions on guns. Anything related to that, you're not allowed to do. You're going to see a theme here. A lot of the things, you can't use it for to support any kind of needle exchange or other programs. So what all of the things mainly were listed in the terms and conditions that they said you cannot do with these funds, which makes sense. We got these funds again. You're going out to get these funds to replace income that you lost and use it to purchase supplies, use it to purchase PPE, use it to make a rent payment to pay your staff. You know, that was the big thing. If you're going to get these funds, you can use them. You can use them in conjunction with the SBA. The big thing they did say, and this will be on, you know, this will come up here in a minute, you can't double dip, right? So you can't use it for the same things that you're using the like a PPP loan for, but you can definitely use it to purchase supplies, or you can use it to purchase other equipment, or but whatever it is, it just can't be any of those things that are listed in the terms and conditions. So wanted you all to be aware of that. It's actually not that difficult to find things to use the funds for, because you just use them in your general practice. I wanted to flip back here for one moment. Oh yes, so on this point, the reporting in 45 days, what I want to make sure everybody's aware of within regard to this 45 days is you're reporting the uses of those funds. So if you did not use all of the funds, then you would report what you used, and then you would have a second reporting requirement in 2021, and it would happen sometime before the end of October of 2021, I believe was the point that, or the date that was provided. But for most dental offices, I don't think you're receiving too much to where it's going to be difficult to use it by the end of the year. And it says too, you're not required to wait until February 15th of 2021, that 45 days after calendar year end. The window opens immediately, so it's any point between when you get it to when you use them to then when you can report it. So if you've used all these funds, if you can document the uses of these funds, you know, for anything, I think this can be pretty simple. If you're keeping a spreadsheet of what you're actually using these funds for. You know, when we talked about like the Paycheck Protection Program, we talked about it very similarly. Many banks would put the funds into a separate savings account. And then as they paid payroll, they would then transfer funds from their PPP savings account to their checking account. And then that was their documentation that they used it that way. I think this can be done exactly the same way if you wanted to. If you wanted to be safe, if you wanted to be really conservative about the uses, that's one way of doing it. Otherwise, as long as you document, you know, you say we purchased, you got $5,000 in HHS funds, you went out, purchased $5,000 worth of PPE or supplies of some sort. That's going to be pretty easy reporting, and then you can go from there. I see we had a question just come in, and I'll go ahead and answer that now because it's in regard to these. So can we not use the payroll and rent if we have depleted our PPP funds? My understanding is it is okay. So once you've depleted your PPP funds, those are all gone, those have been used up, then of course, yes, you could use your HHS funds for those things. What they didn't want you to do was to use HHS funds and then try to count them towards the PPP. They wanted you to use your PPP funds for per PPP costs. So once you've depleted all of those funds, then clearly, yes, you're using it on something else. But one thing I would be cognizant of is they talk about executive pay. So it says you can't use the HHS funds for executive pay. I haven't looked into it too heavily, because really when that question's come up, somebody said, well, can I just use it for executive pay, or to pay myself since I'm the owner? What I've said is you know what, use it to pay your staff, and now you have more money available on another side, right? So just use those funds from the HHS to pay staff or to pay whoever, and then you have other funds available that you can pay yourself. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, but when you do it that way, you just kind of take out any confusion. Okay, so we talked about that. We talked about the terms and conditions, some of the things you couldn't use this for. After that, really, the HHS is not all that complicated. It seemed very complicated on the front end, but mainly it was because we didn't really know what it was. But when you kind of get down to it, it's not all that complicated of what it can be used for. So I have a few final thoughts on this, and if there's any other questions, please chime in. I know I have a few questions that have also come in, so I'll get to those here in a moment. But a few final thoughts for you, and this is something, really be careful, review your application very carefully. There is no appeal process if you complete it incorrectly. So if you put down the wrong number and your funds are too little, you cannot go out and get more. You can do a second, you could try a second application, but you cannot appeal a current application. Again, yes, you can receive these with SBA funding. And my feeling with that is because of just, every single month, week, day, everything that happens has just seemed more and more strange for 2020. And so my recommendation for many has been get as much help as you can, because we really don't know how long everything is going to last. Like we all hope that some of the news coming is that things are going to start to get better and we're going to have a vaccine and all these things. But if that doesn't happen in the near future, I would make sure PPP is obviously gone, but if the program is not available any longer, it's all been used up, or it's expired. But there's still EIDL available, I believe, and you have this HHS funding. I think it's smart to have resources and to have liquidity, and any of those things can be paid back fairly quickly if you don't use them. So that's just my advice on final thoughts. I think it's important. And two, with that, the EIDL, for example, there's very specific things you cannot use that for, and it's very specific in that you can use it for day-to-day things, but you cannot use it to purchase equipment. You can't use it to repair. You can't use it to expand on facilities. You can't use it to refinance other debt. You can use it for short-term payments, like so if you making payments on a credit card, but you can't use it to pay off other debt. And some of the EIDL loans I've seen customers and clients and offices receiving is $150,000+, and that's a 30-year loan at 2.75%. So it's pretty inexpensive money. With that too, so I would advise anybody. To me, it's smarter to have the option than to not, and wish you did. Year-end planning, I think this is going to be a really important thing. And when I talk about year-end planning, not only am I referring to tax planning, of course, being a CPA, but just general practice and cash flow planning and being aware of where things are at. The paycheck protection, it is a tax-free item when it is forgiven. So, but what the IRS has said is you're not going to get the deductions related to the forgiveness. So essentially it treats it as taxable. That might trigger some taxable income that you're not prepared for. And in a year when you wouldn't expect to have it, you probably will. I mean, most practices I look at, they've had very positive cash flows through the first 7 to 8 months of this year because they had things like the paycheck protection loan that helped them when their revenue was down in other areas as well. EIDL is a little different. I mean, that's going to provide you with something, some funds, but it's a loan. It needs to be paid back, and it's going to be paid back over a long period of time unless you accelerate those payments. HHS is going to be taxable. It's going to be treated just like if you received income. And that income, it's going to be normal tax rates and everything. So just to be prepared for things like that, be prepared from a cash flow perspective. I would not want you to be surprised by any of these things you're receiving, because there's a lot of aid out there and it's just kind of coming in waves and everybody's trying to get it. And, I wouldn't want you to be surprised by that. So that's a few of the, a few of the thoughts I have in regard to final thoughts. Remember, if you have any questions, try to put them in the Q&A. I will take a look at the chat, but it is a little bit more difficult, obviously, to see them within the chat. So if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A. I mentioned a few resources earlier. If you guys go out, you visit our website, thejrcpa.com/dental. This is where we have some things around the HHS and some information there. We've also got a few things about some of the new stuff that's coming out, potential new laws that could benefit dentists. For example, automatic forgiveness of the PPP loan. So if your loan is under $150,000, there's the potential for there to be automatic forgiveness with very little effort at that, or very little, other than just probably a quick attestation of you using the funds for the appropriate items. The second one is they are talking about a tax credit up to $25,000 for purchases that are specific to COVID or coronavirus purchases. So we've talked about the additional PPE that needs to be purchased, or training that's necessary, equipment that was needed if you did purchase some of the air purifying items or whatever it is that you got. Those are all things that would be eligible for this potential tax credit. When I say all of this is potential, it's all currently being discussed in legislation, but there's nothing that has been written into law yet. So they're hoping that it will be there. Hopefully it'll be there soon. So I do have a couple of other questions. I noticed this one was answered within the chat, but will this webinar be available? I know, talking to ePractice Manager and their team, this will be posted to the website, and just like a couple of others I've done, we'll have stuff up there. And if there's anything that changes, we always can post updates to it. We can add some additional information. That requirement to report within 45 days of calendar year end, that's something that came out within the last 5 days. So that was a brand new thing that if we did this, just like when we did the PPP back in April, we had changes just constantly within days. And so there were things that we were trying to add there to keep up on that. One of the other questions I had come through, so what are categories for acceptable spending of the funds? Kind of talked, we talked about that already. So that's, making sure that you're using it on things for the practice, within the practice, the operations, and then there shouldn't be any problems there. What is the timeline for acceptable spending? So, really, I guess it's this timing of when do you need it, but also the funds do need to be used up so that you can report them by the end of October of next year. So that's something that was specific in that notice where it talked about the 45-day reporting. It does need to be done and used and reported by October of 2021. Let's see, is the spending of the funds also to be made public? My understanding is no, but I have not seen anything. Like we said earlier, those who received funds, yes. The uses, I would probably say no. But again, I don't know for sure on that one. I would be surprised though. So what if only part of the funds are spent acceptably and the other portion is either not spent or spent acceptably? I think there's going to be, if you don't use it all, which I think honestly is going to be somewhat difficult, because you could use those funds by the end of this year and then put other funds into savings. So I don't know. I guess that it will be all that difficult not to use the funds. I would just go ahead and use them, but using them in acceptable ways is going to be key. So There are some fines and penalties for not using it in acceptable ways, and I would just rather probably not go that route. So if you have questions there, definitely let me know. But look at the terms and conditions. In the terms and conditions, it talks about the penalties if you don't do something like that. So that's the last question that I have that I can see. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sarah, for having me on this webinar. Again, I really appreciate it. I always enjoy meeting with you, checking with you guys, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Elliott. We did have one more pop in. Is there a form available for reporting February 15th, 2021, since these are funds will cover 1 month of salaries?
Yes. Yeah, so there, if you go out to the HHS website, there is the form and the format in which they want you to report it. So yes, all of that information is on HHS's website. It can be found. I'll flip back real quick. So the terms and conditions are here. But if you go to hhs.gov/coronavirus and then the Private CARES Act, provider relief, you'll see all that information. And there's a clear section of saying, reporting requirement, attestation, and all of that. So yes, that's all on their website, and there will be a format that they'll want.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Elliott. We really appreciate you doing this with us. We know that this has been a super complex year on top of all the regular challenges we face running a business. And we just want to let you know that we are here to offer the very best care and the latest information to help you navigate this new working landscape and focus on your patients. So just to let you know, we are currently offering a short-term consulting package, which includes a full evaluation of your current practice condition and its potential, an assessment of staffing and efficiency, full access to our online training, policy, and job description library, an overview of systems and analytics, and a one-on-one implementation assistance with your custom program. So please visit epracticemanager.com/CRP today and schedule your free consultation. Thank you so much for attending, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.